Let's solve this evaluate question. In a 10-year study, so we are talking about a 10-year study, one group of volunteers was given a medical screening for disease X every year. So we know about one group of volunteers, most likely there'll be another group as well. So let's first understand this information. So if let's say, because we are talking about a 10-year study and we are talking about what was done every year, so let's create this kind of a table here. Let's say y1, y2, y3, these are all years, and the study went on till 10 years. So we are creating all these 10 here. Now, group 1, we know that people in group 1 were screened for disease X every year here. Sorry. Yeah. So they were screened for disease X every year. All right. So this is what we have read about the first group. Let's read further. Whereas an otherwise similar group of the same size. Now we are talking about another group which is G2, and it is very important to note that this group has been given to be similar and of the same size. So we cannot say that there's a lot of difference. There are major differences between G1 and G2. They are similar and of the same size. Now, what about this group? This group was only screened for disease X at the end of the study. So this group did not receive screening every year, right? It received screening here somewhere at the end of the study. So this is the difference between these two groups. All right, let's read further. 9% of the first group were diagnosed with disease X during the study and received treatment. So we know that in group 1, that is G1, 9% people were found to have disease X, and this is in the entire 10 years duration, and they also received treatment for it. All right. What about the second group? But only 6% of the second group were diagnosed with disease X when they received the screenings at the end of the study. So here is a difference. The first group had 9% people affected. The second group is found to have only 6% of the people having disease X. Now, without even reading further, you can see that two similar groups are being compared here, right? G1 and G2, these are two similar groups. But the first group had 9% people affected by disease X. They received treatment during this 10-year duration. Second group, when this group was screened at the end of 10 years, 6% people were found to be affected. So there is clearly a difference here, right? Now let's read further what else is given in the passage. The researchers concluded, so we have the conclusion here, that during the 10-year period, so the conclusion is about the 10-year period, disease X must have disappeared without medical treatment in some individuals in the group. So, which is this group? This is, let's understand this conclusion better. So, here are some important words. Disease X must have disappeared. What does disappeared mean? Disappeared means that disease X must have appeared and then disappeared, right? So, disease X happened in more people, but in some of them, it disappeared, that too without medical treatment. So the conclusion does not consider any medical treatment. It considers that it disappeared without medical treatment in some individuals. And we have been asked to evaluate the strength of the researcher's reasoning. So before moving to the answer choices, let's understand the passage better. Let's think of situations in which we can question the conclusion. So, in order to understand the logic of the conclusion better. So, we have this information. We know that these two groups exist. These are similar and of the same size. One receives screening every year, one receives screening at the end of the year, at the end of the study, and there's a difference in the results. So, in which situation can we say that the researcher's conclusion is not correct, that disease X must have appeared in more individuals in the second group as well, but in some of them it disappeared without any medical treatment? So, let's consider some of the situations in which this conclusion is not reliable or can be questioned. First of all, we know that there is a difference between G1 and G2, which is in the frequency of screening, in terms of the exposure that they are getting from screening. What if the exposure that they get in this screening, it increases the chances of getting disease X? If this screening itself is the reason behind higher incidence of X, in that case, the conclusion will not be very reliable, right? Secondly, what if the time required by disease X to disappear without medical treatment? What if this is much more than 10 years? Right. Basically, we are trying to question the logic that someone who got disease X during these 10 years, they could have recovered from it without medical treatment. That duration was enough, right? So, if this duration is not enough, then also we can question the researcher's conclusion. Then also it is not very reliable to say that it must have disappeared if it is not possible for the disease to disappear within 10 years. Another thing can be, what if the screening output, that is, the screening results or the screening process, is not reliable? If this process itself is not reliable, if this output is not reliable, then these 9% and 6% results would also not be reliable, right? So we can think of more such situations in which the conclusion can be challenged. However, with this understanding, we understand the logic quite well. And now let's go on to answer choices and evaluate each answer choice. Choice A: whether there were statistically significant lifestyle differences between the individuals who were diagnosed with disease X and those who were not. So, this choice talks about significant lifestyle differences between two types of people. Which ones? Ones who were diagnosed with disease X and the other ones who were not diagnosed with disease X, right? So this choice talks about lifestyle differences between these two. Now, you have understood the conclusion, and you know the conclusion is trying to explain the difference in result obtained for G1 and G2, right? G1 has 91% people who were not diagnosed with disease X and had 9% people who were diagnosed with disease X. Similarly, G2 had 94% people who were not diagnosed with disease X and 6% people who were diagnosed with disease X. Now, the difference between the lifestyles of these people and these people does not explain why G1 had 9% people identified with disease X while G2 had only 6% people identified with disease X. It does not explain, it does not support or weaken the conclusion that G2 might have had more people who got disease X, and then some of those disease X disappeared for some of those without any medical treatment. Choice A does not add any valuable information to evaluate that conclusion. And that is why choice A is irrelevant to the conclusion and is incorrect. Now, if you selected choice A, what is the possible reason behind that? Why did you make this mistake? Let's understand that. One possible reason is that you did not read or understand choice A properly. Most likely, you thought that choice A says that people in G1 and G2 have significant lifestyle differences, and that kind of made sense, and you selected choice A right away. However, because you did not read it correctly, you did not notice that it is actually about people who were diagnosed with X and not diagnosed with X. It talks about the lifestyle differences between these two type of people, not the people in G1 and G2. It also indicates that you did not read the passage properly because it already states that these two are similar groups. So that can be one possible reason, that you did not understand the passage properly, you did not understand or you did not read the choice properly, right? That can be one reason. The second reason can be that you did not understand The conclusion, the logic of the conclusion, what is it trying to do? The conclusion is trying to explain the difference that is there, this 9% and 6% difference. So, because you did not understand the conclusion in first place, you could not understand the impact of choice A on the conclusion, and that is why you selected. You thought that this choice kind of gives difference between two types of people, so that might be the correct answer choice. So you were not clear with the conclusion, and that is why you selected this choice. Choice B. How many people volunteered for the study because they knew they had especially high risk for disease X? All right, so this choice is about the number of people, number of volunteers who participated because they knew they are very vulnerable to disease X. It's very likely that they will get disease X. How does that help us evaluate the conclusion? Let's say, assume some values to get clarity. Let's say 50% of the people, we don't have numbers, or let's assume that there were total 100 volunteers. So, if there were a total of 100 volunteers, let's consider case 1. So, case 1 is that 50 of them participated because of this reason, right? Because they knew that they would get X, it is very likely for them to get disease X. So 50 of them participated because of that. Now, how does that help? It is possible that, their distribution could have been 25-25 in both the groups, or maybe group 1 had 40 of them, group 2 had 20, only 10 of them, group 1 could have all 50 of them, group 2 could have 0, and the reverse as well. Case 2, let's say most of the participants were like that, 90 participants were like that, 90 volunteers were like that. Now, group 1 and group 2 distribution. Let's see, out of these 90, 45, 45 could have gone to both the groups, or maybe 10 and 80, or maybe 80 and 10. How does that matter? It does not explain how or why the results of G1 and G2 are different, right? It does not explain this, and that is why this choice is also incorrect. It is also irrelevant. Now, if you selected choice B, what does that indicate? It indicates that most likely you had an assumption in your mind, right? You selected a choice based on an assumption. And what that assumption is, that people who were more likely to get disease X, most of those people were in group 1, or maybe group 1 had more such people who were more likely to get disease X, and that is why group 1 had a higher number and group 2 had a lower number. So again, you selected a choice that is based on an assumption, and even if that assumption was true, this is already a mistake, that you are selecting a choice which is based on an assumption. Secondly, even if that assumption was true, you will need to see if this choice can actually act as an evaluate choice. Choice C, how long it takes to be treated for disease X. Now, choice C is about the duration required for treating disease X. Now, is this duration relevant? Does the conclusion even talk about treatment, any specific medical treatment or any kind of treatment for disease X? No. The conclusion is specifically, it states that these people, that disease X must have disappeared without any medical treatment. So, how much time it takes for the disease to get treated is irrelevant. And that is why this choice is also incorrect. Now, if you selected choice C, why did you do that? Most likely, the reason has to be one of these two. So, the first reason can be that you did not read or understand the conclusion correctly. because the conclusion already states that the disease would have disappeared without medical treatment. So the conclusion is not even about treatment. We are talking about it disappearing without any medical treatment. So if you did not notice that when you were reading the passage, it is very possible to think that choice C can be correct. The second reason can be that you understood the passage, and like we discussed, one possible situation in which the question can be, the conclusion can be challenged, is that the duration for disease X to go to disappear without any medical treatment is more than 10 years, right? So you understood the passage, you understood that the conclusion will be questionable in that situation, but you did not read choice C correctly, right? You thought that it is talking about the duration required for disease X to disappear without treatment. So, in that case, even after understanding the passage, because you did not read choice C correctly, you ended up marking the incorrect answer choice. So, you have to be careful while reading the answer choices as well. Choice D, whether volunteers were told what disease they were being screened for. Now, again, this information is irrelevant to the conclusion, which is trying to explain the 9% 6% cap and trying to giving a reason for that. If you selected this choice, probably you had a lot of assumptions in your mind. You added a lot of information for this choice to work, and you really need to question that information, that why did you bring in those assumptions, and without those assumptions, can this choice really act as an evaluate answer choice? Choice E. Now, choice E is the correct answer because it addresses an important aspect, which is the reliability of the screening process that has been used. How reliable are the results that are obtained from this screening process? So, let's understand this choice better. If this frequency of giving incorrect output is high, frequency of giving incorrect output. If this is high, it means that these numbers are not reliable. These numbers may be incorrect. In that case, any conclusion which is based on these numbers, which is explaining the reason behind the difference in these numbers, will not be reliable, right? In the other case, if this frequency is low, frequency of giving incorrect output, if that is low, it means these numbers are reliable. And if these numbers are reliable, it means that most likely this difference exists, and the reason which the researchers have given might be the correct reason. So, in that case, our belief in the conclusion is strengthened, and that is why this choice acts as a correct evaluate answer choice. If you neglected, if you did not select choice E, you also need to understand what made you select choice, what made you reject choice E. And that is when you will be able to complete your error log. Thank you.